Hello, Bill Pollock here of MissouriNet.com. Satellite college football camps. At the end of the day, are they nothing more than just a waste of time? We'll discuss that. And joining me, a couple of award-winning sportscasters up in Minnesota. The voice of the Minnesota Golden Gophers and Minnesota News Network is Mike Grimm. And from South Carolina, Kevin McCrarey, the South Carolina Radio Network. He also appears regularly on their 2-hour night show called Sports Talk. Mike, I'll start with you. You know, as I look at this outside of the Midwest and that footprint, I credit Jim Harbaugh, and I think everybody does, with really bringing the topic of satellite football camps to the forefront. I mean, here he took over a once proud Michigan program that was down and gave it national relevance again. At the same time, I think he's also brought the Big Ten back to life and pumped some life back into that conference. Would you agree?
No question. I think the Big Ten's kind of gotten back on the map, first with Urban Meyer's hire and then the subsequent undefeated season in year one where they couldn't go to a bowl game, and then the national title, following that. And then Michigan said, we have to follow suit and get back in this race, and Harbaugh was the clear choice to do that, and he was souring in San Francisco. And in relation to the satellite camp, it's interesting. Harbaugh was the first guy to really, publicize it, brag about it, tweet about it. I mean, in the last 5 years, there have been a lot of schools doing those things, just not trying to make a big hoopla over it. Once Harbaugh started, that's when certainly much of the reaction and much of the discussion followed.
And I think he had to do that because, as we talked about, I mean, Michigan was kind of down, and I don't know if kids were looking at Michigan anymore, and especially, as you said, with Urban Meyer going to Ohio State.
Yeah, and I don't think it helped with Michigan that just down the road in East Lansing, Michigan State had been to a couple of Rose Bowls. They, of course, just this last year were in the semifinals of the Final Four of football. So there's no doubt they had to try to do something, and Harbaugh is not shy about trying to do things that will get his program attention. And I just think it's a matter of time before he's got that group in the playoffs. I mean, he's won a good coach, we know that, and he can recruit at a national level. It's a name brand. They've got unlimited resources in relation to everybody else, and it's going to end up being a good thing for Michigan, that's for sure.
We're going to talk about those unlimited resources here in just a moment. Kevin, you cover the SEC and ACC, and without a doubt, the SEC has been the top conference. I think the perception in the Southeast, in your area, in your region, is that the Southeast is still the big animal. They had their self-imposed rules of not going beyond a 50-mile radius. And was Jim Harbaugh right in saying that those schools were being – I mean, they were kind of like turf wars, weren't they, where, hey, look, we'll stay in our area with our camps. You stay in yours. We won't beat up on each other. We'll keep our conferences strong. Was Harbaugh right in saying that the SEC and ACC were being a little selfish with this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they didn't want anybody coming down into their area. That's their fertile recruiting bed, and they didn't want anybody coming in. And they made a big stink about it, which kind of made it a big story. If they would have just said, whatever, do your thing, we'll do our thing, and maybe ease their rules and allow themselves to move more, if that's what they chose to do, it would have been fine. But Harbaugh, who is just a master, and I'm a guy that covered Steve Spurrier for a decade down here. Jim Harbaugh is the modern age Steve Spurrier. I mean, he's on Twitter. Steve Spurrier's tame on Twitter. We all thought he was going to be Jim Harbaugh on Twitter. I mean, Harbaugh is unbelievable, and he knows what he's doing, and he got more benefit just from the whole hoopla and stink about these satellite camps, and he probably will from actually having the camps. And then he became the commencement speaker at a high school that has a lot of big-time players. He is very, very media savvy and knows how to play the game. And the SEC, for as good as they are, they're kind of crybaby-ish when it comes to any kind of perceived threat on their stronghold. And I think they got called out a little bit by Harbaugh, and they lost in this one. And I thought it was interesting the day that this got overturned, Georgia, who is one of the more outspoken schools with these satellite camps, they announced they're having one with, guess who? Jim Harbaugh. So it didn't take them long to get on board.
No, if you can't beat them, you may as well join them.
Right.
Mike, and they call these guys student athletes, but listen, when you're dealing as a coach, they're athletes. That's it. You're there to coach them in football. I'm not buying all this education baloney. Are the kids being exploited in all of this? or is this helpful for them?
Well, now yeah. I mean, I think that's a whole different line of questioning. We could do a whole 2 hours on that. I'm probably a little more hardline-ish on exploitation. I do not think they're exploited. I'm around teams a lot, travel with teams. I see what benefits they get in regard to, staying at nice hotels, unlimited food, stuff that most college kids would like. I get that they're bringing in revenue, but they have to support everything. Baseball is a losing proposition money-wise at almost all schools, and women's basketball is, and everything else is. I don't mean to just point those out, but they're drains. And what you have to have is a strong football program to bring in revenue. I think in some cases these satellite camps have actually worked the opposite way, in that they've exposed kids to coaches and gotten scholarships for kids that maybe wouldn't have in another opportunity, because maybe they come from a not as well-to-do family. How are they going to afford to do campus visits, get exposed? A lot of these kids have to pay subscription dues to somebody to get their tape out to coaches, to services. This is a chance for them not, to be exposed to a lot. The Harbaugh spring football thing down in Florida, that's the one I think that got the ball rolling from the southern schools to say this should be outlawed and all of that. And really the irony is schools have been doing these satellite camps. For example, Iowa's gone into St. Louis and into Chicago and done, just quietly gone in there, and then other schools like from the Mid-American Conference can come in and get a look at some of these athletes, and maybe Iowa or Minnesota or Wisconsin or some of these schools that host these more regionalized camps. There's a linebacker that's pretty good, but probably not Big Ten good, but Kent State can take him, and all of a sudden that kid that wouldn't have had a scholarship now has a scholarship. So I think there's benefits. I don't think it's exploitation. Now the interesting thing is only the SEC could make Jim Harbaugh a sympathetic figure in this. Most people think Harbaugh is kind of a conceited dude that's trying to, get a lot of things his way, and the SEC then, as Kevin said, kind of makes a crybaby out of it, and all of a sudden Harbaugh is a sympathetic figure, which is pretty amazing. But these things have been going on. I think the spring football thing down where he went to Florida, I think there's a misconception that now all these schools from the north are going to hold spring football in the south, and that's not really what these satellite camps are.
And really, here's how I see this. I mean, this to me is almost like an Easter egg hunt. You've got kids, from a school standpoint, you've got all these kids that range from the age of 5 to 13, and they're out on this big lawn, and there's all these Easter eggs out there, and the Easter Bunny waves his arms or whatever he does, and all these kids go running out there, all these football coaches go running out there, and it's mass chaos, and nobody knows what to do. But the 13-year-olds go and pick up all the big eggs, and they get the Reese's peanut butter cups and the Snickers. And then you've got the little, 5-year-old kids that are running around. You got one kid in the back who's picking up little eggs and ends up with, jelly beans. And then you got the kid under the tree who's getting the same thing.
This sounds like a first-person story, Bill. Do you have some memories that you're trying to get off your chest here? It sounds way too detailed here.
Well, listen, I was the 13-year-old that pushed the kids out of the way. I was very competitive, so. But at the end of the day, though, the teams that we follow, Kevin, you've got South Carolina, I've got Missouri, and of course, Mike, you've got Minnesota. They're all going to be middle of the range, and it doesn't matter where they go. They're going to end up with the same kids. They're going to end up with the 3-star guys, and maybe they coach them up and they put together a good year or two. But at the end of the day, regardless of where they go, you're still going to have the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Alabamas. You're still going to have those guys getting the big-time players. Right? Kevin, we'll start with you. I'll get both of your thoughts. Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, the blue blood programs are going to have the advantage at those big-time players, but I think Mike made a great point that maybe you go down and have one of these satellite camps and you discover somebody that you wouldn't have if you didn't have this camp, a 2-star or 3-star that fits your system and you can develop. So that's why it's an advantage for the other schools that want to do it. In South Carolina, Will Muschamp said he's going to do it. Dabo Swinney at Clemson hasn't been quite as committed, but I think if everybody's doing it, these coaches feel like, well, if everybody's doing it, we'll do it. And so that's what you're seeing now. If it's an advantage, they're going to take advantage of it, and if it's not, they'll find out later. But I really don't know how much of an advantage it is for any school, Michigan or anybody. They go down and play bowl games in Florida all the time for exposure and brand. I know Michigan football has been down, but people still know when you have the Michigan logo what it is and where they're from. So I don't think it's going to be a huge advantage. I do think it was a great PR move. Harbaugh taking on the SEC and then taking on the NCAA. He's very good, and I agree with Mike. They're going to win big up there, and it's nice to see the Big Ten back on the map because football need a Jim Harbaugh. They need, Steve Spurrier's gone now, but you need those kind of dynamic, villainous type characters in your sport.
What are you watching back there? What's on this? I see guys in Speedos and they're jumping off of cliffs.
Oh, you can see that? Oh, my goodness. Oh, boy, this is embarrassing. It looks like a little diving going on there. We cover it all here at South Carolina Radio Network. The cliff diving is a very important sport to people here in the South.
Mike, if there isn't football going on in South Carolina, then they resort to cliff diving.
Yeah, I just want to know if it's an Acapulco, and if we need a stringer, I'll go.
Yeah, exactly. That's the next thing. You'll get my expense report soon.
Oh my gosh! All right, Mike, I'll give you the closing thoughts on this topic.
Well, just to go back real quickly in relation to Harbaugh being a sympathetic figure in this, because again, some more irony in this is that, a year ago about this time, Urban Meyer was on record as saying he kind of hoped the NCAA prohibited camps. And Kirk Ferentz at Iowa was on record, yes, we've done them. They've been some benefit to us, but he'd like to see things limited. Well, now once the SEC reared its head and the ACC to a lesser degree, it bonded those guys together, and all of a sudden they all think satellite camps are a great idea. So it's an interesting regional battle. There's no doubt about it. I think it does benefit the northern schools to have an opportunity. I think I saw yesterday that there's now in Atlanta, maybe they're going to have like a 37 or 8 school satellite camp where coaches from all over the country are going to show up at like this mega combine. And again, I agree with you, Bill, in a certain degree. I don't know if it's going to benefit Minnesota. They may get a kid that they hadn't gotten before or two, but I do think in the general scheme of things, in this world of exploitation, as we say, I do think it's going to get several kids, 18-year-olds that maybe wouldn't have gotten scholarships. They may end up with scholarships, and it may be at South Carolina, or it might be at Appalachian State, or it might be at Ohio U. But wherever it is, they may get their schooling paid for because of one of these camps. And so in the grand scheme of things, maybe it's a good thing.
Good stuff, giving us perspective on satellite football camps from the Big Ten. Mike Grimm from the Minnesota News Network and voice of the Golden Gophers. And for the South SEC, ACC, Kevin McCrarey from South Carolina Radio Network. Guys, thanks for your time and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching us here at MissouriNet.com.